There's my share screen. Let's see, we go there, and then we go to slideshow from beginning. There we go. Okay, let's see. Now I got to get this window out of the way here.
You're close.
There we go.
There we
go. Got it.
All
All
right.
right. So just as a brief introduction about myself, in case you weren't aware, I'm a professor of biology at Bowie State University. I have been there since 2005. I'm also the curator of mammals at the Natural History Society in Maryland. I frequently give presentations on various topics. I've done a couple of Zoom presentations, and I've also done pre-pandemic. I used to do a lot of presentations in the building, but obviously that was curtailed because of the pandemic, but it's still nice to be able to present some interesting information. I thank everybody for being here tonight. So the title really is kind of, it basically says Shrews of the Mid-Atlantic region of North America. However, what it really should be, the alternative title should be on just why shrews are so cool. So if you hadn't thought about shrews much and you didn't really realize, this is a really, really cool taxa of mammals. Some of the things that you're going to hear about tonight are almost unbelievable in regard to the unique natural history of these animals. So, so what I have basically here, I'm going to talk about exactly what a shrew is, their unique natural history traits, review the 8 species of shrews that are found in this particular part of the US, and then finish up by talking about a couple of important things. One, how does one go about studying shrews? I think that's going to be a really interesting segment. Second one is the ecological importance of shrews. And the third one is big questions facing shrews as we go forward into the future. And then I'm going to finish up with a couple of bonus slides that I threw in here. They're mentioning 2 noteworthy species in this particular order of mammals that are not from the Mid-Atlantic, but are so interesting and remarkable, I just felt compelled to include them. So I'm going to end up with that at the end, okay? All right, so what is a shrew? All right, so obviously it's a mammal, class Mammalia. It's located in the order Ubiquitous. This order used to be, for many, many decades, it used to be called Insectivora. But with the dawn of molecular techniques, DNA techniques, Insectivora, the order of Insectivora was found to be what's called polyphyletic, which means that it had multiple origins. Okay, so you can't really have an order that has multiple origins, so they split it. Okay, and so you end up with multiple orders. And so we have order Ubiquitous, which includes 4 families here. So you could see on the slide there. So you've got the hedgehogs is one family. You got Solenodons is one family. The moles and other related mammals is one family. And then you have Soricidae, which are the shrews, the true shrews. And there's about 400 species of those worldwide. Okay. So unique natural history. So what is so unique about shrews? Well, shrews have a need for speed. They do everything fast. They live fast and they die young. They have the highest metabolism of any mammal. Their heartbeat can be anywhere from 800 to 1,200 times a minute. That is just an incredible heart rate. That rivals hummingbirds for fastest heart rate known. Shrews are a classic R-selected species. So in case you don't know what that means, it means that they have a very short lifespan, they have fast reproduction, they basically put all of their energy into breeding fast and as many times as possible before they die, because they don't have a long lifespan. So they really have to sexually mature. They got to develop fast. They got to sexually mature fast. They got to breed fast as many times as they can, because generally they're not going to live to see a second winter. They will see a first winter if they're lucky, and that's going to be it. So they are a classic R-selected species. Daily activity. They are active 24 hours a day. Okay, diurnal, nocturnal, crepuscular, you name it, any time of day, they're looking for food. They have the highest brain to body mass of all known vertebrates. Their salivary glands contain a toxin which helps immobilize their prey. And I'll talk more about that later. They have specialized dentition to handle tough prey items. So think about shrews chewing on like a beetle. Okay, a beetle's got a really tough exoskeleton. They have to have specialized dentition to be able to handle that. And they do. They can mate up to 20 times in a single day. That seems kind of hard to believe. But again, they have a need for speed. They do everything fast. And they need to eat anywhere between 75 and 200% of their body mass daily. The acronym BM I'm going to have in the slideshow several times, that's body mass. Okay, so think about that. You know, if you're a 200-pound person, you would have to eat 150 pounds of food a day. Think about how impossible that would be for us, for humans to do that. So that would just be at 75% of your body mass. 150 is 75% of 200. I mean, nobody could eat anywhere even remotely close to that. So what they are accomplishing is just absolutely almost unbelievable. So what do they eat? Well, they eat insects, they eat insect larvae, they eat all different kinds of insects. So everything you can think about, crickets, grasshoppers, bugs, any kind of bugs, true bugs, any kind of bugs, they're on them. Earthworms, snails and slugs, spiders of all different sizes and shapes, millipedes and centipedes, pill bugs, salamanders. Maybe they can't handle the giant salamanders, the larger size ones like spotted and some of those, but they can handle salamanders that are bigger than their body. Also some frogs and toads, probably not the big ones, but they could still eat those. They also eat other small mammals, including rodents, and some, particularly the northern short-tailed shrew, which I'm going to talk about first, actually eat other shrews and moles. So what do they do in the winter? So a lot of these diet items are gone in the winter or very hard to find. So they will add berries and seeds and nuts to their list of items that they will eat. They don't hibernate, so they're active year-round. And during the winter, they can lose up to half of their body mass. So think about that. If they're a 10-gram shrew, they're going to be down to 5 grams before they actually get enough prey items to come back to build up their body mass again. So they actually shrink down to the size of their skeleton and internal organs. So they have no remaining body fat left. They've used it all up to survive the winter. So that in itself is just incredible. And I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, including their caching behavior, because they do cache food for later. Predation. So how do they go about getting their prey? So shrews are among the most voracious mammalian predators known on Earth. If shrews were the size of dogs, none of us would probably want to go outside, because these guys are just incredible predators. They have to eat constantly. As I mentioned, they got to eat a large percentage of their body mass, if not more than their body mass, every day. They subdue their prey because they have a small dose of toxin stored in their salivary glands at the base of their front teeth, and that gets secreted into the prey item when they continually bite the prey item. So the toxin is strong enough, it can take down prey as large as a mouse, which is pretty impressive because sometimes some of the mice that they're attacking are larger than them. Prey is immobilized from the toxin and it can be cached for future feeding. So in other words, these poor prey items are basically laying there immobilized or paralyzed. They can't move, and the shrews take them and move them to a place where they're live hoarding them. So those prey items just kind of sit there and they're immobilized and they're just waiting for the shrew to eat them. And the shrew will eat them when it gets around to it, when it needs it. Shrews have specialized dentition that allows for their tough diet. They have iron deposits in their teeth. So when you look at skulls of shrews, at least the ones in the Mid-Atlantic, they are going to have reddish teeth. Okay, and that red is iron, and that iron deposits in the teeth, and that helps them chew through things like exoskeletons, like a beetle or a grasshopper, or just think of insects with exoskeletons. Those are tough on teeth. Okay, and so having those iron deposits, kind of like beavers and other rodents like that have iron in their teeth as well. I mean, that's for a reason, because they're chewing through items that are very tough. And in fact, wear of teeth happens fast and leads to death. So if a shrew wears its teeth out, particularly the molars have ridges on them. And if those ridges wear out and they can't chew their food anymore, they die probably within a very short period of time. Okay, who do they have for predators? Because they're so small, mammals of all sizes will prey on them, especially weasels, foxes, skunks, bobcats, possum, and Blarina is the northern short-tailed shrew. And because they're so much larger than the Sorex and the Cryptotis, they will prey on the Sorex or Cryptotis also. Raptors of all kinds will take shrews, owls, hawks, falcons. Reptiles, particularly snakes, will take shrews. Also turtles and larger lizards can take shrews. Larger amphibians, bullfrogs, other large frogs, large toads can take shrews. Interestingly, fish can take shrews also. There's an interesting article on the internet showing a rainbow trout that had 19 shrews removed from its stomach. So as shrews fall in the water, the trout are gobbling them up. Also grayling also are known to take shrews when they fall in the water. And also invertebrates can take shrews. So large spiders and things can prey on shrews. Shrews do emit a musky odor, but they don't taste good. So because of that odor that they emit, they don't taste good. So a lot of predators will kill them and just leave them laying there. And then they can be scavenged by any number of scavengers like possums or vultures or any other scavenger that would come across them. What about sensory? What kind of sensory abilities do they have? They have very tiny eyes, as you'll see in the photos that I'm going to show you in a minute. So they have poor vision, but they have a good sense of smell. Their hearing is also very good. They rely on echolocation. It's not exactly the same echolocation as bats, but it's the same idea. So they basically make a whole series of these high frequency squeaks and clicks and chatters, and that helps them orient themselves as they move through dark tunnels, which is the type of habitat in which that's very common for them. Is they spend a lot of time under leaf litter and going through dark tunnels. They also rely a lot on their very sensitive tactile abilities. They have very long vibrissae, which are the whiskers on the face. And as they rub against things, as the shrews are moving through their environment, they can help detect potential prey items. What about reproduction? So breeding season usually runs from like late winter through September. Gestation period is about 3 weeks, somewhere around that area. And that's about the same as rodents, by the way, small mammals. So like white-footed mice and other mice that occur around here, That's their gestation period, about 3 weeks also. Generally takes about, generally you have about 3 to 8 offspring born. It's probably more like 3 to 6 are more common. It takes 4 to 5 weeks to wean the offspring, and then the young forage around the mother for another few weeks before they actually leave the mother and go out on their own. Offspring sexually mature at 2 to 3 months. Okay, so that's fast. And they have to do that because they don't have a long lifespan. So they have to sexually mature at a very early point in their lifespan so that they have some chance of being able to reproduce. They generally have 1 to 3 litters per year, but it depends on latitude. Okay, so the farther north latitude you go, the less chances you're going to have 2 or 3 litters. It'll be more like 1 or 2. But in the more southern latitudes, they can afford to be able to have 2 or 3. Okay, what about behavior? They spend most of their time underground or under leaf litter, like I mentioned already. The genus Sorex, which are most of the shrews I'm going to talk about tonight, they were formerly known as being solitary, except during mating. But there's a couple of exceptions to that, one of which is pygmy shrews. So myself and my colleagues that have been working up in Western Pennsylvania documented communally hunting pygmy shrews. We actually saw 8 of them hunting in a group communally together. And we watched them for about 15 minutes. There was 8 of them in that group. And we were just so surprised and aghast at what we were watching. We forgot to film it, but we sat there and just watched it as they just moved like an organized pack moving across the ground. So that's a first documentation of any kind of communal hunting behavior in Sorex. Also, females are known to be able to keep babies safe by caravanning them. So the babies will attach onto the back of the mother, and then the babies will attach to each other, and they will make a caravan like I have in the photo here. So they can make a long chain. So this is not necessarily social behavior, but it's more of maternal behavior. Okay, so now we get into the individual shrews. So I basically have a little, a photo and a range map, and then a little bit of info on each one here. So this is Blarina brevicauda, which is the northern short-tailed shrew. You could see the range of purple there on the right. So it's ranging all the way through the whole mid-Atlantic. This is our largest shrew and probably the most common. And it's probably one of the most common small mammals in the entire eastern deciduous forest. Okay, so the eastern deciduous forest covers most of the whole eastern US. And so that says a lot about how common this species of shrew is. Very common. So it's the largest shrew in North America. It is venomous. So it does have the toxin that it has in its salivary glands is strong enough to immobilize its prey. It's probably not going to hurt a human if it bites you and you get some of that toxin in your skin. It could. There's a lot of variation there in humans as far as a reaction goes, but I'm always careful when I catch them and handle them. I've never had one bite me before, but you know, it's just one of those things that you handle them enough, and I don't worry about them biting me anymore. So I mentioned it's one of the most common small mammals in the eastern deciduous forest. Body mass, it's roughly about 15.5 grams for adults. And we find the range is about anywhere from 12 to 23. So 23 is a big adult. Anything smaller than that's probably a juvenile. So as we found out in our study up in Western Pennsylvania, the tornado blowdown study, they actually do use the blowdowns. So when you remove a whole forest canopy, 12 acres in our case, when you remove that, they came in and started using that blowdown. But as ecological succession progressed, they basically started disappearing. So early on, 60% of the shrews were in the blowdown, 40% were in the control. And then as time went on, by the time we got to last summer, there was 0 in the blowdown. They all went back to the control area. And there's a lot of reasons why that could be, but the main one's probably food availability, prey availability, because that's the thing that drives their existence, is the continuing need to be able to eat. Cryptotis parva is the next one up on the list here, and that's the least shrew. This one is not particularly all that common in this area, particularly in Maryland. There's not very many records of it. You can see the map there. So it occurs basically across the whole eastern US all the way out to the Great Plains and then down into Mexico and Central America. The habitat for these guys is different. So they like meadows, pastures, old fields, not forests. So if you were looking for the species, you wouldn't go looking in forests for them. So the northern short-tailed shrew and the least shrew are the only ones that we have that really have a short tail, really short. All the other guys we're going to talk about here are fairly long tails. These guys are common in agricultural areas, particularly margins around ag fields. I actually did a study with these guys a while back in Iowa. We had an agricultural station there, and we did a pitfall study with these guys. And we were catching them. They're very common there in the pitfalls. And sometimes I would get entire families in the pitfall. So you'd get a mother and maybe like 5 babies in the pitfall trap. So there's some very important lessons here for that. One is that you have to give them a huge amount of food in each pitfall trap. Otherwise, they kill and eat each other. Okay, so you could end up with a bunch of dead shrews in the pitfall trap. And we were checking these pitfall traps every 2 hours all night. So we were making sure that they had plenty of food all the time. And sometimes even 2 hours wasn't enough to satisfy them. So in that study, I worked out a system of individually marking these guys, which is very difficult to do. I used small colored beads and super glue, and I super glued them to the back of their neck, which is the only part of their body they can't reach. And so different combinations of colors seem to work. So in the several week study that we did there, we were able to identify individuals because of this marking technique that I tried out that just happened to work. And now it wouldn't work over a longer period of time because once they molt, then the colored beads would just fall off. Okay, so as long as they're a single molt, then it's probably going to work. So it's a short-term fix for marking. Sorex cinereus, the masked shrew. So the word cinereus means like ashy color, like a grayish with a little edge of black on it, like ashes. That's what the word cinereus means. So this is the first of our Sorex shrews. You can see it's got a really wide range to it all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. So it occurs on some of the Arctic islands, and it occurs all the way down the Appalachian Mountains. So it's the most widely distributed shrew in North America. It's probably the second most common shrew that we have in the Mid-Atlantic region. It occurs in a wide variety of habitats. So generally forested habitats is most common. Also, it occurs in meadows and riverbanks, lake shores, willow thickets, but the highest densities of the masked shrew are found in moist habitats. So they require water. You got to have some water somewhere in their area, in their home range. They do well in disturbed habitats. So you could find them in places that are burned, like burned forests, logged over forests, and even tornado blowdown. So we found some in our tornado blowdown in Western Pennsylvania. Merritt et al. 95 is an interesting paper from that same area in which I'm talking about, Western Pennsylvania. The body mass of the masked shrew declined 50% in the winter So from summer to winter, 50% decline because there's fewer prey, and they have to have heat production and energy conservation in the winter. And so they're using any bit of fat deposits that they had. And they do have brown adipose. So they have brown adipose tissue, and they use that to basically stay alive during the winter when they don't have enough prey to eat. So they're using up all that store. And so once the spring gets here, they're going to be ravenous, and they're just going to eat as much as they can to try to build that adipose back up. Sorex hoyi. This happens to be one of my favorite. This is the pygmy shrew, and you could see the range on there. I point out, I don't really have a pointer to point on this, but if you look at this, looks like there's a little purple island right where Maryland is on that map. Okay, so that's an isolated population of pygmy shrews there that go up into Pennsylvania and down to North Carolina. These guys are incredible because these are the smallest mammal in the Western Hemisphere. Second smallest on Earth, but smallest in the Western Hemisphere. They're very difficult to trap, as are all the Sorex. They're all very difficult to trap. The first individual I got in Western Pennsylvania was alive, and it had a body mass of 3.0 grams. 3.0 grams. And he was in a large Sherman live trap, and he was alive. And I opened the trap up, and I saw this little tiny ball of fur in there that looked like it was rolled up and the size like a nickel. And I just couldn't, I almost fell over in shock that this guy was alive, and it was a pygmy shrew in my trap. The first one I ever encountered was years before that in an owl pellet at Cathedral Forest, where some of you may know or familiar with the Cathedral Forest, which is one of the most unique places in this area. And this is a lesson to tell you that owls are better samplers of shrews than humans are. Okay, so there's a lot of shrew records in the literature where they were discovered from owl pellets, not from human trapping. These guys are very rare in the Mid-Atlantic region, but, and I say that with a caveat, and the caveat is that's because A, they're very hard to trap, and B, nobody's trapping them. Okay, so these guys are probably a lot more common than is reflected in the known specimens. Okay, so there is, I think, a dozen or less records from the entire state of Maryland all time. And we probably doubled the record numbers that we had in Pennsylvania just from our tornado blowdown work, where we caught a number of pygmy shrews. Sorex fumeus, a smoky shrew. So this guy is very interesting also. You can see the range goes down to the very southern Appalachians in northern Georgia and northwestern South Carolina, all the way up into Canada. This guy's a higher elevation specialist more. So you expect to find him in deciduous montane forest, generally found near streams, moist forest, lots of decaying logs, leaf litter, thick and moss-covered rocks. There's extremely few records from Maryland, mainly from the western counties. Smoky is derived from the winter fur color of the shrew. So it has a smoky grayish color to it in the winter. In the summer, it's more of a light brown, so it changes colors. Populations of these guys tend to be clumped. So they may be in keen competition with other shrews, Sorex dispar and Sorex cinereus, which is the mass shrew. I talked about that one. Sorex dispar I haven't gotten to yet. That is the long-tailed or rock shrew. Okay, so there's probably a lot of keen competition going on between the Sorex shrews because they're all very similar in size and they overlap in habitat. Okay, Sorex longirostris is the next one. That's a southeastern shrew. And I have never trapped this one. I've trapped all the other ones before. I've not gotten this one yet. It's not common in Maryland or Pennsylvania or any place where I've trapped for a period of time. It goes all the way to the Midwest and then down into Florida. So it prefers early successional stages in disturbed areas, so cultivated and abandoned fields. It likes thick ground cover because that provides them protection from predators, and also provides places for prey items to hang out. It's a very small species, so its body length is longer than the pygmy shrew, but the body mass can overlap with the pygmy shrew. So these guys and the pygmy shrews are the two smallest ones. And there is a dismal swamp subspecies of the southeastern shrew, which used to be listed under the ESA, but they discovered additional populations of it, so it was rapidly delisted after it was listed, which is a common occurrence in the ESA world, is that something gets listed and then people are out doing field work and they stumble across additional populations of that listed species, and so they end up removing them from the list. Sorex palustris, the water shrew. This is another one that I have never trapped before. I have tried trapping for it and I've never caught it. In this area, particularly in Maryland, it's very difficult to come across. You can see on the map, look, there's a little tiny diagonal purple spot right where Maryland is. So there's a little isolated population of them from very southern Pennsylvania down to northern North Carolina at high elevation. Okay, these guys are incredibly adapted to aquatic environments.
Hey, so, Steve, can I pause you for a sec? We have a few questions before you move on.
Certainly.
The first one was, has anyone checked the genetics of the Mid-Atlantic and Colorado pygmy shrews? Is there such a gap in the range? Like, why would that be? I think the question was.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know, speaking of the water shrew, I know somebody to check the genetics of the water shrew in the east versus the one in the west. So that one's been done and published. But for the pygmy shrew, I don't think so.
Okay. The other question was, can you think of cooperative hunting in pygmy shrews is partially why they're so tiny, or maybe they can take down larger prey?
That's a really good question. I've been thinking about that a lot ever since we made that observation that they were hunting in a group. I think it helps them kick up prey items. So if it's just one animal, you're only going to come across a certain limited number of prey items. But if you do that hunting in a group of 8, for example, and you all stay close together, you're going to be kicking up all sorts of things that you come across. And so that may help them increase their hunting success rate. That's all I can think of. And I don't know if that helps them take larger prey, like in a group. That would be a really incredible observation. We didn't see that, but we did see them kick up all sorts of different prey items as they were kind of rambling together, going across the landscape.
Interesting. And then one last one was, how do you identify shrew species within owl pellets?
Okay. So the best way, and really the only way to do that, is you find the skulls, you get the skulls, and you can determine the different species by the characteristics of their skulls, specifically their teeth. So all the shrew species, particularly the Sorex. So all of these, well, 6 of the 8 species I'm talking about right now are Sorex. And so there's a key to the Sorex. And so they have slight differences in their dentition. And that's how you tell them apart once you get the skull out of the owl pellet.
Makes sense. And one more came in. Sorry, I thought that was the
Okay.
last one. It says, regarding the trout, do fish sold commercially eat shrews?
No, I don't think so. This was a wild caught trout in Alaska that just happened to swallow 19 small shrews that fell in the water, and it was still in his stomach. So when they were cleaning the rainbow trout, they pulled these shrews out.
Wild. Awesome. Thank you. Well, you
Yeah.
can continue. Awesome.
All right. So water shrew. So I remember the water shrew vividly from my undergraduate days, simply because my advisor just kept talking about them and talking about them. We got to get a water shrew. We got to get a water shrew. And he was always, every time we went in the field trapping, he was always looking for a water shrew, and we never got one. I'm sure he's gotten them before, but I never got one with him when we were out there. But I've looked for them, and they're very difficult to trap. In Maryland, they're only known from Garrett County because they're high elevation, and that's really our only high elevation in the state. They like streams and high humidity areas surrounded by heavy vegetation, logs and rocks, which is not surprising because that provides them with places to hide and places where prey items can occur. They're very adapted for aquatic habitats. They have very specialized fur. Not only is it water repellent, but it traps air bubbles. It's got both legs and feet and toes have stiff hairs on them that help with swimming, and they trap air bubbles, which is really incredible. That allows them to stay down underwater longer. They feed on stream invertebrates a lot. So mayflies and stoneflies and caddisflies, all those typical stream inverts you think about, they feed on those. Also small fish, in addition to the terrestrial prey that you would normally expect from Sorex shrews. They also do something that's really just unbelievable. They have what's called underwater sniffing. So they exhale air bubbles at a perceived target because they can't tell if this target is prey or not. So they basically throw an air bubble at them, and then they inhale that air bubble when it comes back to them to confirm the presence of prey or not. So they can basically bounce an air bubble off something and determine if they're going to go eat it or not. To me, that just blows my mind that they have that ability. That adaptation is just incredible for being able to prey on items under the water. Let's see. I think this is the last one. Sorex dispar, the long-tailed or rock shrew. Okay, this guy's got a really long tail. You could see he's got a very restricted range. So you look on the range map there in the area in red, that's all high elevation areas. Okay, so these guys are high elevation specialists. So you're going to find them in the high elevations of the Appalachian Mountains. And that's it, all the way up into Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So high elevation specialists, so they have a narrow, limited range throughout the Appalachian Mountains. In Maryland, they're only known from Garrett and Allegheny County. Very, very exceedingly few records from Maryland. Probably as few as the pygmy shrew. Preferred habitat in moist forested areas and high elevation regions. They're commonly found along mountain streams, and they're found amid debris surrounding rock slides. So if you see a rock slide someplace, they can make their tunnels, subterranean tunnels, in the crevices between the rocks. So that's one of their preferred habitats. Okay, so how does one go about studying shrews? Well, it's very difficult. That's why we know as little about them as we do. Trapping, live trapping, pitfall traps is generally the best way to do it, but that means that you've got to dig holes in the ground and put a trap in the ground, and then cover the edges up so that when the animal walks by, it just falls in the hole. Okay, well, in some places, pitfall traps are not possible. If the soil's really rocky or it's got lots of roots in it, you're not going to be digging too many pitfall traps. So pitfall traps is the best way of trapping shrews alive. But again, you're going to have to put food in that pitfall trap if you want them alive, and you're going to have to check the traps very frequently all night, from before dusk all the way to first light. Shrimp in live traps, you can catch them in live traps. Most of the time they're going to be dead, even if you put a lot of food in there. Ugly traps are a Scandinavian special type of trap. You can catch them in those, and Russian shrew traps. So there's a Russian designed shrew trap that's designed just for shrews. And I have a couple of those, and I haven't really had a chance to try them because I only have 2. So there's a lot of problems keeping shrews alive in live traps, okay? Because they have to eat so much that if they go an hour or 2 without eating, they're dead. Another problem is they don't make a nest with a cotton. If you put cotton in a live trap in cold weather, the rodents will make a nest out of it, and they'll get their bodies off of the cold metal. The problem is shrews don't do that. They have a totally different behavior. And so they will die of hypothermia and starvation because their bare feet are touching the cold metal and they don't have enough sense to use the cotton. Okay, so we also have kill trapping methods. So snap traps are effective. Pitfall traps containing liquids used to be effective. Now that's not considered ethical. Okay, so there are stories of people that have broadcast tens of thousands of pitfall traps containing either formalin or alcohol or water in the entire Appalachian mountain range from north all the way to Georgia. And that they've taken just tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of shrews out of the system because they fell in that liquid and died. So they were meaning to kill the animals. So that's not a type of collecting that's ethical anymore, and that would never be approved by any animal care and use committee. Recovering dead individuals from predators. So you can get shrews from owl pellets, from domestic animals. So cats and dogs are very commonly known for bringing shrews to the front door or the back door or wherever and dropping them off. Marking individuals, very difficult. So northern short-tailed shrews, they don't have any external ear pinna. So you don't have any ability to put an ear tag on there because there's nothing there. So as I mentioned, other methods can be used to mark them. So the small colored beads with super glue or pit tags or toe clipping, which is also not ethical anymore and not accepted. Branding, dyeing fur. So those are all kind of temporary methods. But pit tags, I guess, are the ones that are more of a permanent type of method. So marking individuals are hard. And so you want to mark individuals sometimes when you want to study the populations. You need to know who's who. Okay, so that's why marking is important. Sexing individuals, very difficult. It's a totally different system to sex shrews as it is for rodents. Rodents are easy to be able to tell male and females. Shrews are not. So we're going to have to necropsy the trap mortalities from our study in Western Pennsylvania just to get the sex on our northern short-tailed shrews, because we don't have any idea on how to sex them when they're alive, or when they're dead, we have to cut them open. Field cameras. So they're very difficult to be able to get shrews to detect them on cameras consistently. So you might be able to get one here or there, but that's not going to really give you much data. And then finally, captivity. This is extremely difficult. I only know one person, Dr. Orrin Mock out of Missouri, who's actually brought shrews into captivity. And this was Cryptotis parva, the least shrew. He brought them into captivity and he artificially selected them for survival in the lab. And that took many generations, took a long time to figure it out. he had to figure out what to feed them and how to keep them alive, different conditions to keep them alive. He had a special diet that basically was cat food mixed in with some supplements, dietary supplements, minerals and vitamins, mixed in with mealworms. So he made a very specialized diet for them. And I was in that Iowa ag study I mentioned previously that I was involved with. I stopped and visited Dr. Mock in Missouri, and I got a tour of his captive shrew colony. And he probably had 700 animals in there. He had little individual houses and containers for the shrews. And he took me in the back room that he had, and he actually had a geriatric ward where some of these shrews were 3 and 4 years old, which is absolutely amazing because that's way longer than they live in the wild. And the reason he had that is because he was using the shrews to study aging. And he wanted to be able to extrapolate his data from the shrews, aging in shrews, to humans. And so he was using these shrews as a model for aging. Ecological significance of shrews. So they benefit soil quality because they do a lot of digging, and the digging aerates and mixes the soil that they dig in. They're efficient predators of insects, snails and slugs, spiders, rodents, and other taxa that humans consider to be pests. Many larvae of insect species eaten by shrews are agricultural pests, or they turn out to be agricultural pests. Shrews also, while they're digging and moving things around, they tend to help disperse seeds as well as fungal spores. So that's an important ecological function. Shrews provide a widely available food source for predatory species. Pretty much anything larger than them tries to prey on them. And their presence in numbers in total biomass are significant to the structure and function of ecosystems. So some of the important questions I thought about regarding shrews when I made this talk: how it changes in land use impacts going to affect shrews. So much conversion to agriculture and urbanization. How are continued unprecedented declines in insect populations going to affect shrews? Insect populations, in case you're all not aware, are declining precipitously across the entire world. And I haven't seen a figure for the United States or North America, but I've seen it for Europe, and it was 60 to 70% decline, which is just scary. So that's going to impact anything where insects are part of a food chain. And of course, they are a very important part of the food chain for shrews. Climate change impacts. How is that going to change their range distributions and their prey item distributions and things like that? Continued invasive species impacts. There's a lot of invasive species impacts that invasive species impact shrews in some ways. And so one of those I'm going to talk about in a second here. Continued impacts of various environmental contaminants, pesticides, PFOSs, PFASs. Those are the forever chemicals you've been hearing about in the media. Brominated hydrocarbons, which are important because those are the kind of chemicals that are used in fighting fires. All the fires that we have across the continent, we drop brominated hydrocarbons on them. All Sorex shrews except for Sorex cinereus are listed as state rare and in need of conservation. And that's mainly because they're so hard to trap and nobody's trapping them. So we don't have a real feel for whether they're increasing, decreasing, or whatever. And so they get dumped into the state rare and in need of conservation categories because of that. So here's my bonus slides, my last 2 slides here. This guy is the Cuban Solenodon, known locally as the almaquí. This guy is, it's in the same order. It's not in order Soricidae. I mean, it's not in the family Soricidae. It's in a different family for the Solenodons. But this guy's endemic to Cuba. And I had been to Cuba and I got to see a display of them in the National Museum of Natural History in Havana. They had a giant display of these guys. These guys are almost 2 feet in length. Think about that now, compared to what we were just talking about with these little shrews. These guys are huge. Only about 36 have ever been captured, ever, all time. They're nocturnal, they're burrowing. People rarely see them. They're considered critically endangered. And these guys are really strongly negatively impacted by invasive species, particularly things like rats, cats, pigs, other things that have invaded Cuba. So these guys are one of the most amazing and unique species in that order, Ubiquitous. And then the last one, the Hero Shrew. You may or may not have heard of this guy before. This guy is found in the Congo Basin of Africa. It has a very unique vertebrae. So I have a picture of it there at the bottom underneath the animal there. You could see it, the vertebrae are corrugated, interlocking. And instead of 5, mammalian species have 5 lumbars. Humans have 5. Everybody has 5, except for the Hero Shrew. The Hero Shrew has 11. So their lower back is basically enforced because of the added lumbar and the way that the vertebrae are designed. An early visitor to the Congo that described these guys basically had a grown man who weighed 159 pounds stand on this shrew. He stood right on him for a while and then he got off and the shrew walked away. So this shrew can bear huge amounts of weight on its back, 1,000 times its body mass. So think about that. That's equivalent to a human holding 10 elephants on their back. 10 elephants. If you even try to think about that, that will just blow your mind. That's crazy. That's the Hero Shrew. These guys are just amazing. So I hope tonight that I have convinced you, if you weren't convinced already, that shrews are among the coolest mammalian taxa that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. There are a few more questions that came in here. So
Okay,
I'll read
shoot.
them off to you, and unless people want to shout their own questions out and come off mute. It says, if shrews are so common, how come we don't see them very often? I've been wandering the eastern and southern forests since I was a boy, and I'm in my mid-70s, and I've only seen one shrew in the wild in my entire life.
Well, the main reason is because they're nocturnal.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming out and they're hunting at night mainly, even though they're hunting in the daytime also. They're just doing it under the leaf litter, under the pine needle litter, underground. So they keep a real low profile in the daytime. They come out a little bit more at nighttime, and so that's going to make them harder for you to see them.
Makes sense. Someone else asked, with their high metabolism, how do they deal with less available O2 underwater? Can they switch to lactic acid because of the less oxygen and then convert back to air when it's available?
The way I understand it, they're using the air bubbles that they trap in their hairs. They have the stiff hairs that they trap air bubbles, and so they can use those underwater. So that's how they're doing it.
Cool. And then someone else asked,
super cool. And plus their pelage, their fur traps air bubbles also. So basically their whole body. So if you notice that picture I showed, let me go back to it. Look at the body. Look at the picture there. Those are water droplets. And so that's how the oxygen, the air bubbles are doing the same thing on the fur as the water droplets are showing on that picture.
Awesome. Someone also asked, how large is a pitfall trap?
Pitfall traps can vary. They can be any size that you have available. So the most common one that I use is the big coffee can. Okay, so you know that the regular size, pretty good size coffee can, it's probably, I don't know, about 8, 9 inches wide, maybe. So that's what I use. But you could use a 5-gallon bucket. You could use the bottom half of a 2-liter bottle. I've seen used. So you could custom make your pitfall traps however you want to make it. Of course, the larger it is, the more chances that something's going to fall in it. The smaller it is, the opposite. And remember that you have to dig the holes. So digging the holes is really a problem in a lot of habitats. Let me just I'll tell you that my first experience with it, I dug in a bog because my major advisor and professor of that course was out there, and he said, let's put a line of pitfalls in here. So I go out there and I'm standing in, it feels like I'm standing in this giant wet sponge. My feet are sinking. I dig a hole, water fills up in it, and then I got to put the coffee can in there. I put it in there and the water pushes the coffee can up. And so it's like a constant battle to try to get the coffee can to sit down level to the ground. And the ground is sphagnum moss. So there's a lot of problems with trying to dig a hole and try to get good pitfall traps, because if that trap comes up, if that pitfall comes up in the night, nothing's going to fall in it, because it will be up above the surface because the water from the bog pushed it up. So I think the easiest pitfall trap I ever did was in a sandy soil with not much vegetation around. So there's no rocks, no roots. I was able to put a whole line of pitfalls in pretty easily. So depends on the habitat. And so you can customize your pitfalls to whatever size fits your needs.
Awesome. Another question in the chat was, do they sleep at all? So if they're hunting at night and in the day, I think that's kind of where they're getting at.
That's a really good question. From what I was seeing when I was reviewing all this material was that they don't really sleep. And so that probably helps lead to their short lifespan. I mean, they have a very short lifespan. I mean, they basically have such a very tiny opportunity for reproducing, and they don't make it through 2 winters. So they'll be lucky to make it through their first winter, and then that's it for them. So if they don't breed in the first year, they're in deep trouble of not passing their genes on to the next generation. So I don't think that they sleep. Their metabolism is so high, they don't hibernate. Now, do they go into torpor, which is a kind of a temporary turning down the metabolism? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how much they can do that because, I mean, their heart is beating 800 to 1200 times a minute. All of that requires constant energy. So I don't know that they really are able to turn the metabolism down much at any time in their life.
Interesting. And then there was one last comment that says 2 other animals do underwater sniffing. The nose-starred mole and otters. The moles use it before hunting, while the otters sniff before they eat it. Sniff food before they eat it.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I wasn't really, I think I'd heard about it before, but I read some details on it when I was making this talk, and it's like, wow, this is absolutely amazing that they take that air bubble and bounce it off of what they think might be a prey item, and then when it comes back and they sniff it, they're going to either attack it or do nothing. That's so cool.
Yeah. I think I got everyone's questions. If anybody else had a question, feel free just to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just scrolling through. Oh, there was one more here. What are the spikes on the back of the paloristis?
Oh, the water shrew?
Yeah. So it must have been those water droplets. They just look like
those are water
spikes
droplets
from the picture.
Yeah, there's water droplets all around that guy right there.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Water. Cool.
So I have never trapped one of these guys, and I'm always looking for them. They're just so hard to trap, and they're so so uncommon. But like I said, because people don't trap them and they're so hard to trap, they could be more commoner than we realize, but we won't know that until somebody figures out how to trap them.
Yeah.
But now, as I understand it, they are more trappable in some other areas. They're just not very trappable in this area for some reason. I think I know that people are trapping them fairly easily in the Pacific area, the Pacific coast, but not in the East.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much for sharing all about these wonderful creatures.
Oh,
I certainly know
It was
more
my
now than I
pleasure.
did when we started.
My pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. If nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and log us off. But it was a pleasure to see everyone tonight. We have a bunch of stuff coming up. Everyone says lots of thank yous in the chat to Steve. I see from a few folks. So thank you so much. And I hope we get to learn with you another night soon. Have a wonderful evening and a good weekend, hopefully. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. You too. Bye now, everybody.